Hello and welcome back to another episode of Becoming Relentless. I am your host, Noa McCabe, and I am joined once again by my lovely co-host for the continuation of our series, Lexa.
Woo!
Yay! So today we are going to dive into a very special topic, and it's something that we both have seen a lot sort of being thrown around. It's kind of a buzzword at this point. And I think that today we are going to be able to break it down and teach y'all how to recognize it, how to maybe move through it, and then we'll give our own examples of ways that we have done it. So you're like, what are you talking about, Noah? What is it? We are going to talk about self-sabotage. Boo.
Yeah, I was like, womp, womp.
Yeah.
That one doesn't get a nice little thumbs up.
Yes.
Ugh.
So I was really excited when you brought this up, and I'm glad that we're going to talk about it because I've done it. I've had athletes who have done it. I'm sure that we will continue to do it, but being able to recognize it and maybe move through it and have tools, I think could be really helpful. So I'm going to let you take the floor. How do you recognize self-sabotage?
Yeah. Let's take it a step back because I feel like everyone's talking about it and it's like something that people just throw around when you're not doing something that you're supposed to be doing. Like, oh, you're just self-sabotaging. And when you hear that, it's like, oh, what am I supposed to do then? Or what does that even feel like, look like? Why is it so prevalent? Because you've done it, our athletes have done it, and I've done it. I don't think anyone's immune from the self-sabotage bug. So it's okay, what actually is self-sabotage? It's not because you're lazy. I want to just clarify that. It's not because you're lazy. It's not because you don't actually want this thing bad enough. If you had enough dedication, then you would have done this thing and you wouldn't have self-sabotage. No, it's not any of these things. I like to see self-sabotage as a strategy for when you are too overwhelmed with the way that things are currently being done and you're not ready for a certain experience right now, the way that it's set up for you. So one of the examples that I like to use is if it's you need to wake up at 5 a.m. to go get your workout in, but you are like me and you're a 9 a.m. girly. So waking up super, super early might not actually fit into what you are able to do. So if you're constantly sleeping through your alarm and just not making it to the gym because you've set yourself up to be I need to go at 5 a.m. every single day, that's the only time I'm going to make it work. And then you don't end up doing it. It's easy to be oh, I'm just self-sabotaging my goals. It's no, this is a really cool opportunity for you to feel into what you would actually need to get the thing that you want. So it's a little yellow light almost, instead of a red light, green light, yellow light, being hey, something isn't quite right here. Let's take a deeper peek into what's going on.
Do you think that people feel like they have to fit into a certain mold? I almost am reminded of our previous podcast where there's a pressure to wake up at 5 a.m. and get moving right away. And that is what fit people or successful fit people do. And so almost removing that pressure from yourself because you can be a successful bodybuilder and wake up at noon. In fact, I know most of the big Olympian open bodybuilding men, they don't go to bed till 11 or midnight because they're getting their meals in. They're waking up the next day at 11 a.m. That's when they start their day. It doesn't make them any less successful. Mm-hmm. And why does it have to be different for us? It doesn't. What works for you?
I love that. The word that came to mind was limiters. Mm-hmm. So self-sabotage happens when we have too many limiters on the way that things need to be, and it's not expansive enough for us to actually flow into it. So if you notice that you're doing all of these things, what limiters can you take off of that to make this experience something that you actually can do and want to do?
I like that. What you can do and what you want to do. I think sometimes where I've struggled with this specifically is I don't know whether it is self-sabotage or not. Like you said, it's easy to just label it as, oh, I'm self-sabotaging. Mm-hmm. But I wonder if there are other things that come into play, maybe the self-sabotage is more a flag versus an action, if that makes sense. Instead of labeling your actions as self-sabotaging, is it more so a little flag to say, am I engaging in self-sabotage right now? Or do I just not want to do this thing?
That's a really great question that a lot of people are scared to ask. Like, do I actually want this thing that I'm going after? And I saw someone post this on their story because Instagram went down a few days ago, and they were asking if Instagram went down tomorrow, like, would you still go to the gym? And same thing with like 2020 COVID. Like, if people didn't go to the gym, like, would they still work out? Did they still actually love the fitness journey, love the process? Would you still do this if nobody's watching?
Mhm.
Would you still do this if your coach doesn't give you validation that you're doing the right thing? Would you still do this if you didn't have progress tomorrow? And if those questions are no answers, then that's a really impactful piece of information to have about yourself, because then, like, why are we doing it in the first place?
Yeah.
And of course, like, you want to get healthy, you want to be fit, you want to have a body that feels representative of your inside on the outside as well. Like, those are all amazing goals and reasons to exercise. But if the way that you're currently going about it isn't actually in alignment with what you would naturally want to do, if you're just grinding through your workouts and just waiting for it to be over and then looking at yourself in the mirror like, I'm not getting the results that I want, all of these things, then, like, what if we just did it a different way? Like, how can this feel better for you? Because that's where the self-sabotage comes in, when you aren't getting the thing that you want, or it's like too constrictive and there's no room for you to actually go get what you want.
Right. I see that a lot in like prep settings, especially if maybe the reason why they are engaging in the contest prep, or even for myself, like if the why becomes a little shaky, it's easy to then feel, oh my gosh, this is so limiting, this is so restrictive. And I think that's why we probably see it a lot like in our fitness space, just the limiters on prep are really restrictive. And so finding ways to navigate around that while still adhering to protocol and going through the plan that your coach has laid out for you, I think that is where it gets sticky for most people. So what advice would you give in those scenarios where there are pretty like strict parameters, like your cardio, your training, your diet, those things have to be adhered to?
Yeah. It's what need are you trying to get met through this action? So if it's sleeping through your alarm, as like the example that we're having right now, then what is the underlying need behind that? Like, you're exhausted. Of course you're exhausted. Yeah. You're in prep. You don't have a whole lot of food. Sleep is probably not the best piece. Okay, how else can we help you feel rejuvenated, regenerated, so you can still get to the gym? Like, what other way can we do that besides like sleeping through your alarm? Like, can we find time for a 5-minute nap? Can we find time for you to just like sit with your eyes closed to yourself at any other point throughout the day? Can you, even instead of snoozing your alarm, just keep your eyes closed for 5 more minutes in bed and just be like, I'm consciously giving this to myself right now because I know that I'm tired and I have a really big day ahead and my body just needs this little extra time right now, and then we're going to be good to go. So just noticing the underlying thing that you're trying to do with the self-sabotage, give it its moment, give it its 5 minutes, it's 5 minutes of fame. And then from there, go get after the thing that you need to get after in that sense.
I like that. I like that a lot. You give it its space, and also you go do the thing that you need to do after. Yes. It doesn't have to be the all or nothing in a way. Yeah.
They can coexist. Fun fact. Yeah. One thing that you had mentioned that I've been thinking about in my head that I haven't really had space to talk through, so maybe we can chat through it, is the why component. Because that's another thing that I think a lot of people throw around. They're like, what's your why? And it's almost like they say it in this like condescending way where they're just like fishing out if you're actually in it for like a right reason that they think is accurate, when I've been thinking about it and I really don't think that there is a good reason to compete. Like, and I mean that in the sense that there are so many other ways. Like, if you want to feel confident in yourself, if you want to challenge yourself, if you want to feel super powerful and strong and capable and intelligent and feel like you're part of something bigger than yourself, there's a billion different ways you can do that. Like, there are so many different ways. Like, we wouldn't have time to talk about all of them.
Yeah.
So if like that's the reason, then you could always turn that around and be like, well, you don't need to compete to do that. So it's, if you want to compete, then I think you should compete, you know? I'm not sure. How do you feel about that? I feel like we might disagree on that a little bit.
Yeah. So I feel as though competing is such an extreme. So when I ask my athletes, and it's funny you say that because I ask it in the very first email correspondence that we have. So when I send out their program, their training, their diet, all of that, I have this really long email as well that I'll send out. And at the very bottom, I touch on the mindset component because I'm really big on like making sure that you're mentally stable, or that you have a growth mindset, or at least an open mindset to continuing to like improve your mental health. But I always ask them in there, like, why do you want to compete? What is this going to do for your relationships? What is this going to do for your career? What is this going to do for the way you feel about yourself? Like, I ask them 10 questions, and each of them is like a why question, digging deeper and really encouraging them to get to that root of why is it that you do truly want to compete? Because it's an extreme. It's not very healthy. The lifestyle itself can be healthy, right? Training, eating well, cardio, all of that. But when you're trying to get stage lean, it's not going to be healthy. There's very few people who have like the genetic resilience to like come off stage and have great blood work, like very few. And so I like to challenge them to really reflect on, why is it that you want to get on stage? Like, why is it that you want to compete and put yourself through this? What are you hoping that it's going to do for all these different areas of your life? Because if they can parse that out and identify, like almost what you touched on, I want to feel powerful. I want to challenge myself. I want to learn how far I can push my body or push my mind. Those to me are pretty solid reasons, versus if someone's like, oh, I want to compete because I like the way it looks. I like the physique. I just want to have this shredded, lean body. That to me would be something I keep in the back of my mind. Not necessarily that it's a wrong reason, but that reason is not going to carry you far enough in your prep, because when you get to that point of fatigue and just your mindset is a little bit shaky, like you're either tunnel visioned, or you're like, man, is it worth all of it? Like, you start to question whether what you're doing is worth this physique that you want. And just knowing where my athletes are coming from can help me guide them through it. So if I know that an athlete wants to get on stage because she loves the physique, she loves the shredded bikini look, then when we're going through her prep, I'm a little bit more cognizant about that. And I ask about her body image. I ask about, is this still something that you want to do? Because sometimes, like, I've had athletes where we get halfway through the prep and they're like, you know what? I don't actually think I'm doing this for the right reasons. I don't actually want to get on stage. I don't want to go through the rest of this prep and then a reverse. Like, I like the way I look and feel right here, right now, and they're a little bit leaner, but it took them going through like a little bit of the process first to realize that. And maybe they didn't realize that the shredded physique doesn't feel very good. It looks cool. It does not feel cool. You don't feel good. Yeah. And so that's kind of where I have talked about the why and the right reasons. But I would agree with you a little bit in the sense that if your reason why, or if it's not the right reason, and I don't like saying it that way, that maybe there's other things that you can do to explore versus like going through a contest prep and getting on stage, because you might not like the end result.
Yeah, for sure. I would add to my statement that I don't think there's a right reason, but there can definitely be not so right reason.
Maybe it's like, instead of like right and wrong, maybe it's like strong, like convictions versus like a desire to like be a certain way. Like instead of strong and weak, maybe, or right and wrong, maybe there's a way to describe it where it's like, this is a very solid reason, and this is a.
I feel like there's like intrinsic and extrinsic reasons
for
why. Because I feel like the ones that I'm a little bit more concerned about, and I can use this for myself too, like for my background, I started competing because my mom wanted to compete, and she never got to due to some health reasons. So it's like I picked that up from her, and I was like, I'm going to do this for us. And it's like, well, that's not really honestly strong enough, because it's her focus. It's outside of myself. So I'm still like looking for, I want to make my mom proud, all those things, which is fine, but maybe not in a way that if it starts to like hurt me internally, that's going to be a strong enough reason. So same thing with people who, this is a very extreme example, and I haven't really like talked to a lot of people with this mindset, but the like Instagram clout, I don't like that phrase, but that's like what everyone says. It's like, are you just competing for Instagram clout? It's like such an easy fallback. I think that's why people say it, like, oh, you're just doing it for clout. It's like the witch hunter thing, because you can't really prove that you're not doing it. Like, we're all posting, we're all talking about our journey, we're all trying to meet other competitors, and it's so sticky. I don't like it. But I feel like what you just said about like what we've been talking about with the empowerment and feeling confident and feeling like you can push yourself. Those are all internal reasons that only you can give yourself. No one else can give that to you. Nobody else can be like, oh, you are confident. And it's like, you know when you're not confident. You can feel it. You're like, not really.
You're like, thanks, I've tricked you.
You have fallen into my trap. So yeah, just like the internal pieces, doing this for you is probably going to lead you the best way. And circling back to self-sabotage, if you notice that you're doing these things that maybe aren't conducive to your goals, that's a really great place to ask, why am I doing these things? Like, does this feel like it is for me? Does it feel like I'm trying to make my coach proud, someone else proud?
Yeah. That reminds me of the last time that I got on stage, actually. And I've talked about this before on the podcast, but that's like, I had an instance of self-sabotage, and haven't really explored the underlying reasons why, but just hearing you say that, honestly, I think a lot of that pro card prep, of course I wanted to go pro. Like, that was such a big dream of mine and a big goal, but I prepped for 9 months straight. And like in the last 4 weeks, I binged on my diet, which I've never done before. Like, I don't go off plan. That's just not me. But thinking back, it's like somewhere along the way, instead of doing it internally or continuing to pursue the goal of like, I want to go pro for me, it started being, I want to go pro for my team, for my coach, for other people who have been watching my journey. It almost felt as though I was doing it more for them than I was for me. And I had that like moment of, I don't think I'm good enough to go pro, so I'm just going to eat all this stuff and like sabotage myself, which obviously that wasn't the thought going in. I didn't have those thoughts going in. Like, going in, it was like, I'm really hungry. Like, I don't care. Just let go of control. But like, looking back and reflecting, it's really easy to see like, oh, my mindset at that time was more focused on the external. Like, oh, all these people are counting on me. All these people have been supporting me and cheering me. Like, I have to do it for them, versus I'm doing this for me.
What that brings up in me hearing that is, we self-sabotage when we've already experienced like self-betrayal. And that feels really interesting, actually, because if you're doing it for everybody else, it's like you forget about yourself. You forget about your needs, like what you actually want and desire and all of these things for what other people expect from you, or what you think other people would appreciate from you, which is like also a low level form of like people pleasing, which we all do on some level. But then at that point, the self-sabotage would be like you taking your power back in a way, to be honest, to be like, okay, like I've been doing this for you guys for so long and I haven't done anything for me.
Yeah. And that going off plan was for me. Like, maybe deep down, that is what it was. Like, surface level, of course, I wasn't like, yeah, I'm eating these things for myself.
Suck it.
Right. Like, yeah. But that's so interesting that you say that, because I can definitely, I can connect those dots. Like, that really does resonate. And I would be curious if other people, like those listening, especially like experienced competitors, if they can think back to certain times of maybe they've gone through these preps where they have betrayed themselves, and then they end up self-sabotaging.
Food time.
Meal 2. I'm already 2 meals behind, you guys. Can you believe it?
Womp womp. We hope Megan isn't listening.
Yeah.
Ugh. I think with prep, it makes a lot of sense why people would quote unquote self-sabotage, because so many of your needs, if we pulled up Maslow's little hierarchy, are being taken away. It's like, of course you need...
Not Maslow.
Not Maslow. Like, we're pulling away the food. We're pulling away like the support in the community, and also some of like the sense of self. Like, your sense of self can start to crumble with who you used to be. So it does make sense. There are a million reasons you can dive down, which is why I think prep is such a self-exploration experience, and it is a lot more intense mentally than a lot of people think. But I really like the idea. I want to play with that more, of like the idea of like self-sabotage happens like after the self-betrayal. It's like it's trying to get you back to yourself,
right?
So you don't keep doing things that are out of alignment with you.
Yeah, that's huge. I'm on it. Like, I hope she doesn't mind me sharing, but I had an athlete recently, I think, who experienced that, because we were in prep, and she's an entrepreneur. She has her own business. She's been pouring so much of her energy into her business. But then at the same time, prep was taking away from that, right? Like she was having to go to the gym 2 to 3 times a day and build her business and lead a team. Like there was almost the growth of business and then the restriction of prep. And we started to get into some sticky points with like her not being able to adhere to certain protocols, like missed steps or missed water. And some people listening to this might be like, oh, that's basic stuff. Like, why are you missing that? But think about it. Like, if it's so basic and so easy and you're missing that, that's a flag. Like, that's little self-sabotages that you're doing because you're not in alignment. And so we had a conversation and it was hard. And I think both of us were disappointed and relieved because she was like, you know what? I don't think prep at this time is right for me. I want to pour all of my energy into my business. And that feels more in alignment with where I'm at today versus doing this prep. And we kind of circled back. Like she was like, I realized when people were like, oh, why are you competing? I would just say, oh, I want to go pro. But there was no emotion behind it. There was no like conviction. It was almost just a sentence that she was reciting. There was no connection to it. And so I was really, really proud of her. And I still am. I'm very proud that we were able to like have that conversation, identify why what was happening, and then move forward. And I think both of us are just in a good spot with recognizing that like we worked through that. She could have kept going. I think if I would have pushed and been like, no, you can do this, like you got this, I think she would have been like, yeah, of course, I got this. But it would have been 12 more weeks of self-sabotage and not feeling in alignment. And I think it's really powerful to be able to recognize that and see, okay, yes, this is not in alignment with me right now. Like I don't want to do this. And then just moving forward and feeling good about it. I was really happy with that. But it was interesting because in those moments, I think the both of us were really confused. Like we were just like, why is this happening? Like you've adhered all through growth season. You've adhered all the way up to this point. Like what's happening with the self-sabotage, like mentally. And so being able to see her dive in and reflect and come up with these answers was really cool.
I love that. 2 things that stood out is when she was saying, I want to go pro, I want to go pro. I hear that all the time. And it's almost like it's someone else's dream and someone else's voice coming out of them. And it doesn't feel very embodied when they say that. Like, what does that mean? Like, what does that actually mean to you? And the second thing is like, it gave me like little goosebumps when you were like, we had to kind of like pull out of prep. And I'm so proud of her. Like, that's so big. I wish we had more talk around that because I feel like a lot of competitors think whenever they pull out of prep or if something happens and they can't compete that they've failed.
Right.
And it's no, we're proud of you. We're proud of you for doing what actually is in alignment with you. Because the self-sabotage, I know it says self in the title, in the name of it, but it's like not like you're really doing it. There's a sneaky underlying thing that's kind of like pulling your strings. It's like an underlying need that's asking to have attention. And that's the one that's sleeping through your alarm and like having some extra sneaky snacks at midnight.
Yeah.
So it is you, and it's also not a fully conscious part of you. So you asking those questions and like encouraging us to dive deeper, that is one of the perks of having a really good coach too. So they can see you from the outside and say, hey, this doesn't really feel like you. I haven't seen this before. What's happening? What's going on?
Exactly. Like you're not just a number. And I know that you coach the same way. Like we're very similar in our coaching practices where we care about the person as a whole, like as an individual, as a being, versus somebody that just pays us or somebody to just get on stage and win. Like there's a lot more to it. And so it is really cool to be able to stand in my own and as a coach and say, I'm proud of you for pulling out of prep versus like, yeah, you failed. Or have that air about it. Because I feel like I've experienced that personally. Like everybody here knows I've done 2 preps, 2022 and 2023, and still have not stepped on stage. And it very much felt like failure. Like I was like, I guess I'm not good enough. Like, and I think luckily, because I do love competing so much, I'm ready to go again. I'm like, okay, we're going to prep again. Let's get on stage. But I have a lot more confidence like in my current coach and like support system and everything. But it can feel really, really difficult to start a prep or to go through a prep and then not have that outcome of getting on stage. And I don't want my athletes to go through that, and seeing them realize that like prep is not for them right now is really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I could summarize the self-sabotage piece, I think a lot of that would be solved just with openness, just like with curiosity. What is this action that I seemingly don't want to do, but keep doing over and over? Like, what is this trying to do for me? What does this do for me? What is this getting for me? Just having that openness. And then if the answer is, oh, maybe I actually don't want to prep right now, or, oh, maybe I actually can't make it to the gym on these days with my schedule like this, or maybe I'm not cut out for this food being this low right now and I have a little bit more work to do, and being okay with whatever the answer is. That I think would solve a lot of the self-sabotage issues that people are coming to us with.
Yeah. So if somebody's listening to this right now and they know that they are engaging in some self-sabotage behaviors, like what would you like to leave them with? Just like continue to ask yourself questions, have that curiosity. Is there anything that they can do?
The first thing would be to just notice that this is trying to help you. It's trying to serve you in some way, even if it doesn't feel like it. And that's not like in a gaslighting way where you're like, this thing is hurting me and it's my best friend. No, that is not what I'm saying. I am saying that this part of you is trying to get something out of this behavior that seemingly is in opposition to your goals. And it just needs a little redirection, a little help, a little bit more openness to figure out what direction it actually needs to go in. Because clearly the one that we're trying to go down isn't working right now. So we just need to figure out the puzzle together, or by yourself if you can figure it out on your own too. That's also great. But just notice that it is in its own weird way trying to help you.
Mm-hmm. I like that. It's almost like reframing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this will be a whole nother podcast, but I think in the fitness industry, it's really easy to like have that inner critic and like be really hard on yourself. And so if you can quiet that inner critic voice that's telling you like, oh, you're just not disciplined enough. Like you don't want this enough, or even the external. Cause like a lot of coaches be saying ridiculous stuff like that. Like, oh, you just don't want it bad enough. You just don't want to win enough. No. How about we reframe it? We take that what's occurring and look at it deeper. I like that a lot. Like just having that reframe, perspective shift. What?
Can we also just block coaches who talk like that, please? Block, clear, delete, because I won't talk about the inner critic stuff too much today, but that gets me on a roll. Like every single time someone's saying something horrible about themselves, that is never their verbiage. That is never their language. It's never something that they just like came up with out of the blue. Like I want to call these things on my side saddlebags. Like nobody has, you did not come up with that. Like you learned that from somewhere. And anyone who says that ever, like clear, compost, delete, recycle, burn that idea in a fire, please. Like and the fact that people use that in like pain point marketing just to get people to like want to change their situation or feel badly about themselves that they hire you, like block people who do that, please. Watch your inner critic just sneak away. Replace them with nicer, more open-minded people who don't want to make you feel like garbage so you get into their 12-week program.
Mic drop. I know. I was like, I didn't want to open like a whole can of worms, but I did want to touch on that because I do think it is so prevalent and it goes hand in hand with the self-sabotage. Like a lot of the time as competitors, as people in the fitness industry, or even people who are looking to get into fitness, you're almost like shamed or made to feel bad about yourself. And then that inner critic is so loud that you can't discern between coaches who actually want the best for you and then coaches who just want to take your money. It's hard. It's hard out there.
Yeah, everyone's trying to do the same thing. And apparently, if you want to be in the fitness industry and you want to be a bodybuilder, then you need to shame yourself and punish yourself and murder your legs and all of these things just to get the job done. And I don't agree with that. I do not claim this.
We don't claim this. And I think that is why I love having you here on the podcast because you're able to deliver a fresh perspective. And also, like, I think that you are paving the way and part of the coaching, like the coaches in the industry who are paving a new path. I think you're very much there. And that can be seen in our previous podcasts, like topics that you've talked about first before anyone else, like has even addressed it. So I think that this today, us speaking on this, we are going to start to see that shift. I'm very optimistic that the good coaches who are open and curious and willing to look at their athletes as a whole person is going to become the norm. And like, I very much believe that you're part of that force and that change. So I'm very proud to have you on here. And yeah, is there anything else that you want to say about self-sabotage before we wrap this one up?
Honestly, I think we covered it really, really well. I think I'm going to be thinking about this episode a lot because that like little light bulb came off when you were talking and I was like, holy darn, that is crazy. That feels so accurate to me. So I'm going to dive into that and talk about it a little bit more with my girls and feel into it more. But
yeah,
this felt like super interesting and I'm going to be thinking about it for a while. How about you?
Yes, I have a lot of things to mull over and I'm excited. So, yeah, I hope that everybody listening enjoyed this episode. I feel as though we're like fleshing these ideas out real time. So you guys are really getting a good glimpse into what it's like to hang with us and be part of our little brains, which I think is so fun. If you guys have like any questions, comments, if anything here resonated, we would love to hear about it. DM us.
Doesn't resonate too. Like if you're like, if you think we're full of garbage, we would also love to hear that. Like,
honestly,
I'm interested.
I really do appreciate like any and all feedback, like criticism or otherwise. So please let us know. As always, it really helps if you guys can like, share, subscribe to the podcast, send it to a friend. I just appreciate all of the time and energy that you guys spend with me. And so I'm very much looking forward to giving that back to you guys. And until next time, stay relentless.
Peace.
Bye. Cut.